Welcome to Heart Path Podcast. We've got the lovely Jenna Faye Madden, who is a seven-figure conscious leadership coach and business strategist for female visionaries that are creating the new earth that we are all walking into. And it's such a pleasure to have you here. I have to say, for the folks listening, I found you, I think it was on Facebook. Social media for sure. And I believe it was probably Facebook. And I just saw your posts. I'm like, oh, who is this woman? Just because you're working with heart-based business leaders and visionaries in many different areas. And I just loved your content because it was very raw, straightforward, and at the same time, like you weren't gatekeeping, this industry secrets. You were just sharing things. So I absolutely just, yeah, loved your content and then found you and explored a little bit deeper. And I am part of Jenna's membership, the Bolds Move Club, as well. So it's been lovely to get to connect with you and to be in your world and to learn from you as well. And I'm very, very happy to have you here. So welcome.
Thanks, Terra.
Yeah. So could you share with the lovely folks that will be listening or watching, hi YouTube, a little bit about yourself? I've done a little intro, but I know there's more. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I would so love to share. And as you were sharing how we connected, there was a nugget of that popped into my head that I'll share
Yeah.
as well, which is, yeah, I think we did connect first on Facebook and then, but we didn't like really know each other, I feel like too well yet. And then remember we didn't piece it together, but my husband and I bought this like dragon
Right.
meditation kind of event, and then he pulled us back and we emailed, and I emailed you. I didn't really know, I didn't put two and two together that it was you, and you were so great about it. And then you were in my world, and for just a long time I'm like, yeah, badass new earth leader. And then somehow we started working together and I was going, wait a minute, you're that dragon woman. And we didn't even know that we were living in the exact same area, I don't think either. And so it was such a small world of synchronicities. And I had to say that before I jumped into everything else because I thought it was such a good way and story to kick off today's episode.
Well, and the synchronicities, because yeah, the event was like months before, and then
Yeah.
it's like you're in the orbit. So isn't that neat how that works out?
Yes, yeah, like it all about the synchronicities, something I'm sure that will be woven into today's conversation. And yeah, a little bit about me and my story. I'm fresh on this. I went live yesterday and I made a whole my story Instagram live. So I'm like, not that I forgot my own story, but I am fresh on that right now. And so I'll give a really quick kind of Cliff Notes version. So you shared a little bit about what I do and what basically led me to that, because I think that's probably the most interesting piece of the backstory, because I really was living a totally different life, a completely different timeline if we go back 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. You know, toxic relationship, super unhealthy in my body, was in a corporate job I hated. Like everything was just so different. And when I started my awakening journey, which started more on a physical level, as I find it does for many, where it was more of a health journey, then I got involved as well with network marketing, which was kind of my gateway drug to entrepreneurship and freedom and all of that, where I was like, oh my gosh, there's other options out here. I don't have to work in a corporate job that I don't like for the rest of my life. And my life pretty quickly, even though it was in linear time, you know, probably over a couple of years, really radically changed because I changed my health. I quit my job. I started my business. I met my husband online. You know, we started traveling the world together. I left that other relationship that ended with a police order. Like there was just so much change that happened in the kind of 2014 to 2017 period that led ultimately to the evolution of my current mission, my current work, my life's work, really, of what I do with Soul Meets Strategy, because it really was an evolution that started with my own awakening and journey. led to business, and at the time was more spiritual life coaching, healing, kind of holistic, bringing in nutrition, fitness, health. And it would always kind of lead to the same place of women being like, this is so good. And now I'm so clear on my purpose. How do I start a business like you did? How do I start living this life like you do? And I realized I was good at teaching those other things, but I was great at teaching the business stuff. And so I kind of just followed the breadcrumbs that led into more of what I do today.
Hmm. I love the wording, following the breadcrumbs, because
Yes,
they will be there. And sometimes you could have blinders on or attached to what you've been doing or the way you've been doing it, but the breadcrumbs are there.
totally.
Oh, wow. So, and that does happen a lot if you are teaching people specific modalities or even the coaching where the natural progression is they might go in this career path, but it helps to have somebody that supports them and guides them. So what was it for you? So understanding that you were good at the other modalities and methods in which you were working with people, but then the great part with the business, what made it more seamless for you to do a transition? And did you struggle? Like, were there some of the back and forths of, oh, but what about this?
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of iterations on this evolution. So, my first business and brand was actually called the Sacred She Sisterhood. I even have the logo tattooed on my arm right there. When I went through a tattoo phase where I'm like, oh, I'll tattoo this, I'll tattoo that. So, I tattooed my logo at the time to my arm. And that's when I was like, doing card pulls and doing Reiki training certifications for people. I had online personal training clients, and that was my bridge into kind of the online space. And I had this program at the time. This was kind of when things started to shift. It was called the Pathway to Living in Your Full Potential. And that's where I started to add on business modules at the end of it because I was getting all these requests. And that really lit me up because a lot of the women who were coming to me, they were light workers, they were healers, they were awakening women. And a lot of the time I feel like the business piece isn't in the genius zone. And you just don't know what you don't know in terms of like the business skills. And I started to realize as well that my ripple of impact was much bigger when I was helping the other light workers get their missions out there in bigger and bolder ways. So I realized, okay, this makes a lot of sense to me on kind of the whole scope of things. And so Soulmate Strategy was born at that point. Interestingly, my husband came up with the name and we launched it as more of like a couple's brand at the time. So like our photos, the offers, they were all co-facilitated by me and my husband as a brand. And we did that for about a year, and it was maybe like 60-40. I was like maybe a little bit more the face of it, but we really were growing it together. And it just naturally shifted and evolved to have him kind of going off and doing his own thing. He still plays a huge role within my business, but he has his own businesses, his own brands, his own projects. So after about a year, this was probably back in 2018, 2019, is when it really just became my brand, with me being the face and kind of the pioneer behind it.
Yeah. Well, and that is beautiful as well though to even venture in that avenue with your partner and be able to build it together.
Yeah.
And once again there are these natural evolutions that happen where it's just like this is the direction it's going, and instead of trying to make it stay in that other format, really allowing it to become what it wants to be, right?
Yeah, I so agree, Tara, because it's definitely there's been a lot of death and rebirth, and a part of that
Mm.
cycle is the letting go, I feel like, of things, letting go of ways you thought it was supposed to be, letting go of programs, letting go of clients, letting go of all like identities, just all sorts of things in order to just follow the breadcrumbs, or as I like to say, follow the activation
Mm.
that just naturally evolves. I feel like a lot of us in business are basically just playing out the same timeline over and over and over, kind of looping it without embracing the evolution. Because I honestly think, especially for anyone who's built up any level of success within their business, is scared of it all crumbling down. Like it's very scary, I think, to keep evolving at times.
Yeah. Well, and I know you and I have even personally talked about this because for my business, it was going through like these changes, and the letting go I found was terrifying because you've got
Yeah.
this stuff that has been your center and your focus and your financial stability for years. And it's like, what do you mean it's changing? What do you mean it's evolving? But, and I'm sure you know this as well, and even folks listening, if you don't allow it to change, like things will change. It can either be graceful or the crumbling.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the change part's inevitable. It's like who do we choose to be through that process? I
Yeah.
feel like is the determining outcome of that inevitable change. Yeah.
So soulmate strategy, can you enlighten us? What does that mean in terms of working with yeah, with a variety of clients that you have? Like, what are the main things that you do to support them and their business and them in the changes and the evolution?
Yeah, yeah. When I strip it all back, I feel like, and this is what I stand for and really facilitate in my brand, but I'm a strong believer, especially for conscious entrepreneurs, that there's really two key pieces. And that's why I've really honed in on it with my work. And so the soul side of it, to me, really comes down to frequency, energetics, mindset, and really all of that in one word. I would say would be described as identity of who we're really becoming and who we're being in our business, because that's such a shifting piece of who we are and how we run our business. It's not static, it's not linear, it's always shifting and evolving. And a lot of the time I speak to leaders and it's kind of like their vision has expanded, but maybe their human self hasn't quite caught up to that yet. And so that's where I feel like it's, I don't even really believe so much in blocks, but it's really about pinpointing like where's the incongruence? Like where is the energy feeling funky or heavy rather than light in our body when it comes to being seen, running a business, our identity as a business owner. So that's more of the energetic side of it all. And on the flip side is the practical side of growing business. And so that to me is the actual strategic pieces, actually having things in place that are going to be sustainable as well, because I feel like anybody can throw a strategy together, which a strategy to me is simply just a sequence of events that lead to a result or an intended result, we
Yeah.
should say, because lots of strategies don't work, a proven strategies when we've done it and it worked.
Yeah.
And business in itself is such trial and error. So we're all just trying out strategies and proving them. And I feel like that's a really key piece of business as well, is the actual practical nuts and bolts that is unique to each person, but does require a level of structure and the masculine energy and also a lot of the feminine energy as well. I feel like it's truly equal parts of both of those energies, but how we navigate that is huge. And how the new earth transition, I feel like, relates into this is also such a key component because we're all navigating this shift right now, which I feel like is an amplifier. And so, on a human level, a lot of our shit is coming to the surface.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reprogramming, there's a lot of healing that's going on. And I feel like when we're doing that, we also need to feel like we have some safety, some structure, some security on how we're actually doing it. Because I think there's a lot of marketing in the field of the online space that is just telling you to just do more, but not necessarily taking into consideration if it's the right thing for that person and for their goals, or not just being fluffy marketing that's just talking but isn't really showing the walking side of like how to actually do it. So in a nutshell, I feel like it's equal parts identity work,
Mhm.
equal parts business strategy for us to really have a sustainable, thriving business that is resilient through these really changing times.
Ooh, and to add with that, like a commitment level too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like having your own business. I joke all the time because it's like it's not for the faint of heart. Like sometimes you might think you're a crazy person. It's like, oh my gosh, stepping outside of the comforts of we're doing quotations, the comforts of maybe a 9 to 5 where you've got all of these guarantees, but then there's also a trade-off too.
Exactly.
So for
Yeah.
you, if we're talking about even this new earth evolution that we're going through as a species, as a
Hmm.
species here, how have you noticed that changing within your business and even the clients that you're serving? Have you noticed that the women that you're supporting are more in that frame of thought?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely in the industry as a whole seen a pretty big spectrum and
Yeah.
a lot of trends as well, like in terms of, like you said, it's not for the faint of heart to be an entrepreneur, let alone an entrepreneur of like your own brand, your own business, like not like a product or a brick and mortar, but a business that is really us as personal brands sharing our gifts with the world, which is so vulnerable and also takes a lot of radical self responsibility because like you said, the programming of the matrix and the 9 to 5 illusion, like it goes really deep, and I think it's really quite uncomfortable for people to be fully reliant on themselves as an entrepreneur in terms of their success, their cash flow, and I feel like a lot of people can't hack it, which is kind of brutal to maybe say, but I think that there's a lot of people who are interested but not committed, or maybe in this season of their life, they're not quite ready yet. And that's not good, bad, right, wrong, or otherwise. I just think there's a lot of people who, and it's very common, and to me, it totally makes sense where we start to awaken, we discover our gifts, our purpose, our passions. The next logical step is to start a business and monetize it. And I know I was like this in the earlier stages where I was like, okay, if I build it, they will come, and just kind of naively assumed that marketing and sale, like it would all just take care of itself because I was in my heart and showing up on my purpose, and kind of got schooled and spanked by the universe that there's so much more to it. And that's where I feel like people either rise up at that point or they go back to more of what they know. I always say when we hit resistance, we do more of what we know. And so I see a lot of people come in, even people who have been in for years in this industry, and they kind of have been dropping like flies a little bit because it's so deeply a part of their own personal journey that I feel like a lot of people end up going back to what they know. So, in terms of who I've been working with and what I've been seeing, this has been a part of my own entrepreneurial journey that I'm sure lots can relate to. You probably can too, where who I work with has also shifted and evolved over the years. So, back when I would work with anybody who was willing to pay me, I was really seeing like a pretty broad spectrum, and there was definitely a lot of, self-created kind of like codependency, victim savior kind of stuff. With a lot of people who were more in the interested, not committed category, even though they were lovely humans, but from a business perspective. Since then, my standards have just gone up a lot more because I'm, truth be told, not the best person for those people. Like, there's probably people out there where their genius zone is to help fledgling new entrepreneurs like figure out what they want to be when they grow up. But that's not really me. And that's what I've had to realize too is the power of specificity, and just like boldly claiming who are we the best at working at? Who do we want to work at? So most of the women in my world at this point, especially as clients, they're up to big shit. Like, they are on a mission and they're in that percentile of people where like nothing's going to stop them. It's inevitable because they do have such a big mission on their heart and they see themselves as the kind of person who's always going to figure it out, even if there's road bumps along the way. And so that's what lights me up the most because I feel like those people they're all in. They're doing big things. And I do feel like business is one of our biggest tools in the collective right now for change, and it's a great medium and a vehicle for us to make a big ripple of impact, and that's really where I feel like my efforts are like best directed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And even where you were saying, like, this is almost like a business 101. Like, yes, cast the net out, but not to everybody and everyone.
Totally.
Like
Yeah.
when you first start your business, because it is exciting, you're like, oh my gosh, I got a paying client. Like you get so excited, but at the same time, like it is so important to be clear on how you're here to help and who you're helping. I find for me, I'm with more of like in business the beginners where they're just
Yeah.
starting or they've had them. So it is exciting, but we talk about that in the very beginning. It's just like you need to know, because if everything's so spread out like that, as someone that is the coach or the mentor, like it can be disheartening for you if you want to see them have change or transformation.
Totally. Yeah, and that's where I think, and this is like, you're such a great example of someone who is doing such a great job of helping people who are maybe a little earlier, maybe on the business
Yeah.
journey. And like, to me, it always comes down to like the personality traits, the qualities of the person. And so I bet you your clients are people who, regardless of where they're at in business so far, it's like they have that all in energy. I bet, like they're the kind of people where they're figuring it out. Like they want to do this. They're going to start building it. They're taking the action. And I feel like those are the things, that really lead for somebody to have like that long term business impact and success that they want.
Yeah, and so much like maybe it's, and I really love how your business is soul meets strategy, because so much of it, like if you're going to have your business, or when you have your business, so much is also connected to you and your personal development and your inner work as well. And so perhaps folks, and maybe if you're hearing this, this is you, if there is that doubt, or if there's the fear, or just like you might hold yourself back, it's curious to explore like what that's about, and to work
Yeah,
with that and to resolve that, so that if and when you decide to have a business, like it might still be there, but it won't stop you, right?
exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Well, and for you, what, because that you had a huge change from corporate, and then it's like, okay, so I'm going to be doing this and helping people in this way. And so what happened for you? Because sometimes we get the signs right away of it's time to change, and then, maybe it doesn't happen right away. But what was it for you with your transition from the corporate world to go, okay, no, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm here for, and just explaining that a little bit for people that might be struggling with that right now. What helped you to transition?
Ooh. Yeah, I love this question. Yeah. So I think there was a couple of key things that really contributed or also supported that transition. And so, for context, yeah, I was in the corporate world for not really that long, like four years. And I was in one particular job in human resources and safety for 3.5 years. And, pretty quickly realized like that was not my soul's calling. I might not have called it or known that at the time, but just in terms of my satisfaction, I went in really bright eyed and bushy tailed out of university, expecting I was going to do things that felt fun. Like I was going to hire people and make their day. But the reality was I was more like firing people and ruining their life, like it wasn't actually that high frequency and fun. And I also very quickly felt really capped. Like there was nowhere really for me to grow, even within the company, financially, career wise. It's like I was the one person in that role within the whole company. So it's not like I was even really going to be working up a corporate ladder or anything. And so I just wasn't really feeling that satisfied. And so when I was in network marketing and I'd had this like 70-pound weight loss transformation, was feeling really good, started to go to events from this company, and I went down to San Diego and I went to Las Vegas, really more just being like a product enthusiast at the time. And when I went to these events, though, my mind was blown because they were talking about building a business online. And obviously, it was all like very targeted to this company, but still something really clicked for me in that moment of seeing people up on stage and talking about how they built up businesses and they did it all from their phone. And I got pretty jazzed, and I started to build that business just locally. Like it wasn't crazy, but I was still at my job at that point. But I was kind of disengaging, you know, and like using a lot of my time to be on Facebook and be selling shakes to people and just like, you know, or watching trainings or mindset videos. Like I just started to really binge personal development, I would say, and like kind of basic social media marketing. And I would call my boyfriend, now husband, in the parking lot most days and just kind of cry and be like, I hate it here. I'm so over it. So I was like really having the universe like kind of, it was getting louder and louder and stronger that like I just didn't want to be there spending 40 plus hours a week of my life there anymore. And the day that I decided to quit, it kind of all came to a head because the company used to give out $20 to each employee. There was about 300 some employees at this manufacturing plant that I worked. And so on their birthday, one of my jobs was to page them to my office and give them a birthday card with their 20 big bucks in there. And so one day I paged this guy, it was his birthday, and I could see the whole manufacturing plant through the blinds in my office. And I paged this guy and it was taking him forever. So I'm like looking through the blinds, like, where is this guy? He was hugging every single person on the floor. So it took him 30 minutes or whatever to get to my office. And he came into my office with his head down and he's like, okay, Miss Jenna, I'm ready. And I'm like, happy birthday. And he dropped to his knees and started sobbing. And he's like, you're not firing me today. I'm not getting laid off. And I was like, no. And I was so heartbroken and just thought, like, I can't do this anymore. So I quit shortly after, but I did make an action plan just to get into the tactical things.
Yeah.
So I didn't have really like savings or a huge fallback plan. My little business at the time was, you know, not enough to sustain me. So I decided to get logical about things. And I, instead of just quitting that day, I went and I used my couple weeks of vacation time and I went and trained as a personal trainer and got certified.
Oh,
And
wow.
then talked to the gym that had really supported me on my journey. That's where my best friend was, who my personal trainer became my best friend. And they're like, yeah, we'll hire you as a personal trainer. So I basically lined up a job for me, which at the time I thought that would be like my forever career. Like I was really excited and I got my health coaching training, my Reiki training, and was like, cool. So I quit my job to do all of that. And I did that full time for a year in my hometown, but also kind of pretty quickly realized, although it was better than corporate, it was still time for money. And it's like I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning to meet groups of ladies at the gym for 6 and then training until 10 and then, you know, have a break and then I'm doing this and then I'm back there in the evenings. Like it was basically back to the same schedule I had as a waitress of doing split shifts, and I was burning out and I'm having clients text me 5 minutes before their session when I've already driven there being like, "Hey, sorry, got to bail." Like, and just really quickly realizing like, I don't love it. I loved the transformation of helping people. But I also I learned a lot, which led me, this is kind of the breadcrumb
Yeah.
too, was in that role. I would have so many women come in and they had really surface level goals because they just didn't know what they didn't know. So most women would come in and be like, Jenna, I want to lose 10 pounds in 10 days. Like, how much HIIT cardio do I need to do? And I'm like, wait a minute here, you know? And it's like, zoom out a little bit and it's like, well, what they actually want is to like feel good on their vacation with their
Right.
husband. And you know, and I'm like, hold on, Karen, like what you need to do is just start walking daily, you know, like actually get embodied in your body, like don't make, you know, like all these like mindset kind of things. So I realized that I was okay as a personal trainer. Like I got people results, but it was more because they felt safe with me and because of my coaching, not because I was maybe the most brilliant workout planner in the world. Like I, you know, I got the job done, but I also realized, you know, just on a side note, people probably shouldn't be able to just take like a weekend or a week course and be a personal trainer. You know, when there's people who are kinesiologists and people who are
Right.
training 4 years, where I'm like, I don't know how to deal with somebody's knee replacement surgery. So I also realized I wasn't passionate enough to keep furthering my education in that area to like really make it what I would feel like a very good career in terms of my knowledge. And I noticed the pattern and just like the activation that I was a lot more excited about the mindset and the coaching and helping them realize that they were just in like a pattern. So it all kind of came to a head though when my husband and I decided about a year into doing that whole new career to start traveling full time. And I was like, oh, shizzles. Okay, I'm going to have to move this online. So I
Yeah.
did. I started taking personal trainings on Zoom, which was like a whole new thing back then in like 2016, 2017.
Oh, wow. Yes.
I started putting up posters in the Kootenays of like I get like little Facebook memories where it's like, fall into fitness with Jenna, you know, and pay me $10 a month and I'll train you. Like it was, I didn't really have the business foundations of how to really build something and scale it up. So I was kind of naive, but following that next step of deciding to start traveling and leave our hometown, it forced me, because at that time I still didn't have savings or some sort of plan, but like the voice got so loud of the misalignment that I had to listen. And the best way I can describe it, of how I think of it, is that most of us are living in discomfort, but we're comfortable in that discomfort because we're used to it and it's familiar. And at a certain point, I find that the discomfort of staying in that place and staying the same is more than if we actually just make the change. And so when I started to make the shift, it's like I actually got really good at being uncomfortable. Almost too much so, because I think for a while there, I was just like searching the dopamine hit of like radical life changes. So it's balanced out a little bit more now. But yeah, that was like really some of the key things, both practically and just from a story perspective, that happened on the evolution. And a lot of it really was, as cliche as it sounds, about expanding the comfort zone, and I would say risk tolerance of being willing to bet on myself, where there was 1,001 moments where I'm like, what if it doesn't work out? Or we moved to Australia and I'm like, well, what if it doesn't work out? And I always was just like, well, I'll figure it out. Like I'll get a job, or I'll come back, I'll do this. Like I always knew I would figure it out. And that was the biggest energetic, like the biggest thing. Like if everybody listening, if you tap into that knowing and trusting, you'll figure it out. Like you're always going to be fine.
Yes. And you will be shown.
Yeah, that's the
You,
thing.
you won't know until you do it.
Exactly. It's like a lot less thinking about things and more trusting and then doing the things, because there's definitely a lot of action involved, but and it doesn't mean you just blindly do it, but also it's coming more from the body's wisdom and what feels true and what feels right. Or if you keep having synchronicities, like for me on my path, a lot of the times my husband and I would get the same download at the same time. And it was kind of like validating, where it was, out of nowhere, we're both, let's move to New Zealand next week. Okay, I was feeling New Zealand in my field too, and meant to talk to you about. Like we'd have a lot of moments like that where we would just follow the breadcrumb and then go online and be like, oh, here's a great opportunity, let's move there, we're going next week. Like things would happen on hyperspeed because I wasn't expecting things to not work out. I wasn't in resistance. I was definitely in more of a surrendered flow, I feel like, throughout all of it, even though there was a lot of like, holy shit, scary, what if it all falls apart moments. I just didn't let myself sit there and create from there. I would like feel it, be present to it, and then carry on.
Yeah, and we have to highlight what you just said. You did not let yourself sit in that space and create from it.
Exactly.
That is
Boom.
important. Yeah, to be in the feeling. And please, if you are working your 9 to 5, as you heard Jenna, she didn't quit that day.
Yep, yeah. I know we all have those moments where we're like, just burn it down, even when we have a business that's up and running. Like I'm sure you've had burn it down
Oh, yes.
moments, and I feel like it's the same as if you're in a relationship, like a marriage. Like we've probably all had moments where we go into that more like flight response, and we want to burn it down or we want to run away. And making decisions from that reactive space are not usually like our highest form of truth. They're more wounds, their patterns, their traumas, they're things that are coming up to the surface that aren't wrong, but they're not necessarily leading us to our highest timeline either, which I know I've also made lots of decisions from that place. And again, they weren't wrong and I still got to where I was going, but it just added some more detours into the process.
Like the engine breaks down, it's smoky.
Totally. And you're like, where am I going? What am I
Yes.
doing? It's kind of like driving without a map and you're
Yeah.
trying to do a cross country road trip. Like, you'll probably figure it out and get there, but you might be taking a lot of random side roads because you just don't know where the highway is.
That is a beautiful analogy. It's like
Thank you.
taking a road trip without the map.
Yeah.
And so often I feel like when you first start business, because I know, God, like for many years there was no plan. I was just
Yeah.
winging it as you were and many people. It's just you're doing it, this works, and you keep doing it, and then this works. But it is important to have a plan, especially if you want a career and a
Yeah.
lifestyle versus just a job as an entrepreneur. Like it's
I
so
think
so
I think you just
important.
hit on a really important piece, which is that most, because we don't know what we don't know, so we just do
Yeah.
more of what we know. When we start our own businesses, most of the time we treat ourselves like an employee trying to
Yes.
work our way back up the ladder. And this is why also I think people get discouraged. They
Yes.
leave doing their soul work and they go back to what they know, or they keep going, but it's just like a much longer grind than it needs to be, or it just feels like it's kind of plateaued or capped out. And I'm a strong believer people can kind of override that and hustle their way usually to their first six figures or so in business, because of course there's always a level of trial and error. Like, everything in business is kind of trial and error, but we can be a lot more intentional, I feel like, with it, and just even how we're building, like we talked about, of like, who are we actually wanting to work with rather than everybody. It's more of refinement. And so I feel like people can kind of just go on a hope and a whim and get to a point. But I do think that the sustainable success to really, like you said, have a career, like make it something that's built for longevity, and to not do it in a way that has us just feeling like an employee, an overworked employee, where I know most of us work I know I work 10 times harder in a lot of ways than I ever did in a job, because I was good at getting shit done at my job, but I also was really good at just kind of meddling about my day and then just like cramming it all into 2 hours so it like met the quota. But a lot of the time I was just zoned out or on my phone or whatever, versus in my business, like that's a non-option because the buck stops with
Yes.
me, figuratively and literally. So I feel like that's a really big piece of all of this as well in business, is having a roadmap, not only so we have the direction, because the map can change, you can pick another route anytime. It's not so rigid, and I don't think it should be, in my opinion, that we now feel boxed in and kind of trapped or overwhelmed or bored. Just enough of a plan that we feel safe and we have a direction, and that there's that level of intentionality also for things like our schedule, because I know I was very guilty of overstacking my schedule, my commitments, my obligation, partly because I didn't really have a plan. So I would just say yes to everything
Yes.
and do a lot of things, but maybe not that effectively. So I think that's also where the plan piece comes in place. So we can be radically honest with ourselves of, okay, maybe this project needs to wait till next quarter. Okay, maybe right now this is the thing that's going to move the needle forward, that I can really give it my all. I can give it my attention. And I think that's the value of having a level of a roadmap for
Mm.
entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and that's so important to know that it can change. The map can change,
Yeah.
and to honor yourself and what you're needing too. Like oh God, hustle? No, thank you.
Right?
No more. I remember being so burnt out, and you would think, how is that possible? You've got a spiritual business. How are you burnt out? Exactly everything you just shared, Jenna, because there was no plan, and it's just like the wheel keeps turning and turning, and so much is piled on. And I would talk to other people in my field, and then I started changing, and then we'd be talking. I'm like, oh, you're still doing that. I am so
Mm,
glad that I'm not there in that cycle anymore, because it's hard.
yeah.
And it's hard to get out of if you don't start to create the plan.
That's the thing. And we just keep going back to more of what we know. And like for me, as an example, it's like I was always launching new programs. I'm a generator. I love to create. Even when I say I'm not creating, I still end up. I literally messaged one of my business besties last week and was like, I'm not going to create anything new. I'm doubling down. And then today she messages me. She's like, so what's this 3-day program happening next week? So we have to have outlets for
Yeah.
ourselves and not box ourselves in. But I also know that if I still was running my business how I did earlier on, of just constantly launching massive programs with massive launches and like huge modules to record, all these deliverables and calls and bonus calls and all of these things, like I would not be able to keep going. Like it would be so exhausting. I remember early on people could book with me 364 because I did take off Christmas Day off my calendar, but if they wanted to book with me at 3 a.m., they could. Obviously, there was some scarcity coding there, but I was truly thinking I'm building a global business, and so I need to be available. And what if somebody in Australia wants to book
Yeah.
with me? It needs to be at a good time for them. So I would just have my calendar wide open, which now is a completely different kind of structure, in terms of how many calls I do and when I do them. And I remember a past mentor, when I was asking him, like, why wasn't I making more money? Why was I like capped? What did I need to do? What else did I need to do? And he's like, Jenna, when you value your time more, you'll make more money. And I kind of scoffed at the time. I'm like, I value my time. Like, says the girl who you can do a call with at 4 a.m. But many years later, I now realize that I really wasn't valuing my time. I wasn't really valuing my gifts. And so this didn't really have that much to do with things like pricing and stuff. It was more of a frequency
Yes.
thing. And it was a huge shift so that I wasn't exhausted in my business, because there was definitely times where I was more exhausted in my business than I had ever been when I was unhappy in corporate. And I'm like, wait a minute now. I'm like, this seems like just a different trap with a different
Right.
face, but it's the same thing.
Yeah. Because it's like an energy leak if there's
Yeah,
no
totally.
boundaries for that. And yeah, and that's the whole thing. Once again, you want, when you're in this space of wanting to help, and that's your intention, you just want to be there. But we have to be there for us too.
Yeah, yeah. And I really realized through that experience that, and of course, there's exceptions. This is a generalization,
Yeah.
but I found when I was really like over giving a lot of myself and helping anybody because I wanted to help, most people didn't have like the skin in the game. And so they weren't serious. And, I was like pouring out, but they weren't necessarily like all in on themselves. Again, not so much about like the pricing and stuff. It was more of a standard and an energy. But I did find that I was really exhausting myself because I wasn't really valuing my gifts and my time in that kind of way, because I was just trying to be everything to everybody. But a lot of the time, the people didn't even really value it.
Right. Well, because if they're
and
not,
so it wasn't worth it.
yeah. Well, and what you were saying, they weren't all in. So if they're not necessarily at a point, so once again, maybe that point in their life of fully being able to value themselves and their transformation, how could they value
Yeah,
somebody else in that way?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
So, so what trends are you seeing in terms of, because once again, I'm going to have all of your links in the show notes. Her content is amazing, so just a shout out for that.
Thank you.
And some of the things that I've been seeing is where you've been talking about, yeah, people are more conscious of what they're investing their time in and their money in, and just in general where they're what they're investing in so many different ways. So what have you been seeing that might help somebody that's listening to this to be like, oh, you could find it in her social media, just saying. However, we've got you here.
Yeah, I would love to share. Yeah, well, I feel like a couple key trends I'm seeing, and this kind of applies to listeners, like if they have a business, but also just if they're investing in things and interacting with businesses themselves. So I think two key contributors right now is number one, like you kind of alluded to, buyer consciousness is a lot higher, especially I would say got accelerated over the last 5 years, because when the COVID stuff was going on and people are like locked in their home, well, what did a lot of people do? They started personal development. It sparked a lot of awakenings. People started, either hating their job or realizing they didn't like their job, or they started to start exploring other options, or they lost their job. Like there were so many change things melting in the pot that I feel like people, and also a lot of fear too about the future. So there was a lot of people just jumping in and investing. I don't know about you, but I joined all sorts of things, especially
Oh,
like 2020, 2021, where it was like it didn't really take a lot to convince me. Not that I needed convincing, and if anyone's listening to this, I don't recommend you convince people.
yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like I didn't need much discernment. It was just like, oh, this sounds really great, you know? And at that point, just to even give an example, it's like the cool marketing online. It was all about 10K months. Like you've
Oh,
made it
yes.
if you're doing 10K months. And I totally fell into it too. And like marketing and people were joining my programs. It was all about 10K months, which then attracted people who were obsessed with hitting financial goals and not necessarily my tribe. But now it's like 100K months. You're not cool unless you're doing 100K months, you know? So it's like this natural evolution's happening, but there's still like a lot of fluffy stuff. And so back then, the fluff was enough, I think, that
Yep.
people would just jump in. And that not just in business coaching, but like the have a better life, the healing, the
Yep.
relationships, the health, like all of these kinds of industries, people would just jump in, whether it's like they're hiring a trainer for the first time or they're getting healing. Like people just were investing a lot. And then I feel like there was a little bit of a pullback period as the world seemingly kind of went back to a level of normalcy. But
Nice.
what's happened on the other side of that, I feel, is like a lot more discernment and higher buyer consciousness where people bought things that were overpromised and underdelivered, or they overextended themselves, I think is a big thing, whether financially or even just time, and then like course overload. Like one time I was talking to a client and she was like overwhelmed trying to keep up with her programs. I'm like,
Mm,
how many programs are you in? I remember asking her because she was just mentioning so many, and I was like, how many? And she counted them out for me, and she had bought 32 programs
oh,
in like a 12-month span. I'm like, well, no shit, you're overwhelmed.
yeah.
So there was a lot of broken sense of trust in self
Yeah.
on a lot of levels, where I feel like a lot of people were like, oh, I bought things and I didn't do it, so they felt shame about that, or they invested lots on credit cards and they felt shame. There was all sorts of scenarios that went on. So now people definitely are investing just as much as ever,
Yeah.
but the discernment is deeper. And it's not that they need to be convinced, but it's like it's not their first rodeo. So
Mm,
they want to read the details. They need to do a vibe check within themselves. They might want to lurk you before they go and buy. They might want to see a little bit of social proof. And so that's where I feel like as marketers, like marketing in our business, it's so essential these days that we kind of check off some of these things if we want to maximize our sales. Because again, we're not convincing people, but if we want to make it easier for people to feel confident to say yes, then we can't market like we did in 2020 and expect
no.
2020 results 5 years later. It's just things have shifted and evolved. And the other key piece is AI.
Mm,
That's another piece that I think is a big player or contributor to what's changing in so many ways. Number one, for business owners, while I wouldn't say I'm like a diehard AI person. I was like a huge no to it initially. I've now kind of found my own middle ground on this, and I feel like it's neutral and it can be benevolent, it can be nefarious. But to me, it's undeniable, like as an online industry, that a lot of business owners are using it, some
mm,
well, some not so well.
mm.
I see a lot of chat GPT content out there as an
Oh, yeah.
example, which, people are sniffing it out now. So I'm like, that isn't necessarily helping sales. But
Yeah.
just as an example, like if somebody's wanting to brainstorm, or they kind of are somebody who makes a lot of spelling mistakes, or they want feedback on their sales page, or
Mm,
they're, like I just came up with like a bunch of new recipes. It's like people are using AI now for basically the things that they could have Googled before,
yeah.
but now they're getting faster, more personal answers. So that obviously to me is impacting things like people's offers, because surface level content, as an example of 3 protein foods you should eat, like that doesn't actually really blow people's minds. They're like, I can just ask the internet for that. Like I don't see that, go take my money. And so it's impacting how people are buying as well, in a good way in my opinion, because it's requiring more innovation and depth from creators and entrepreneurs, which doesn't necessarily have to be harder and take more time, and can also be counteracted by utilizing AI for the more automated kind of tasks in our business. Like I just was working on a project, And I totally feel great about giving it what I wrote and then saying, can you please give me a welcome email based on this? And it spits it out. Like I can save time in some places now to put more time and effort into the ones that really require me and my essence. So it kind of all equals out. But those are some of the big trends and shifts I'm seeing right now in business, especially online business in general.
Well, and with that, it's like people, it's almost like they've always wanted real and authentic,
Yeah.
but it's a lot harder to fake real
Yes.
and authentic now
Yeah.
because
That's the
people
thing.
are open.
Yeah, and I feel like back then too, it was like being real and authentic was going live on Instagram or Facebook,
Yeah.
and like that was good enough, but it didn't even matter if you were giving any substance or depth. It was just like, "Oh, that's cool. I like Jenna. She's live." Which by the way, when I see my Facebook memories of my first lives, they're pretty cringy, but we all have to start somewhere. But yeah, I do think that that desire has always been there. Now it's gotten so much louder and stronger, especially because people are more deprived of human connection, I feel like, than ever before. So it's actually easier in some ways than ever to be seen, to get visible, to be noticed, for people to be attracted to you. It does require self trust, though. And I feel like a lot of leaders aren't really trusting themselves, or they're trying to shortcut in the wrong areas.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily helping them to see things like the sales or the type of people entering their world or the visibility that they want to see, because it's just like the priorities are a little bit off. And the areas that are fully them, like maybe they're too in the weeds of their business, is happening, but then where it actually requires their energy, such as being authentic and really sharing their truth, might not be happening. And I see that changing though, because it's kind of like we said, it kind of like the playing field kind of like levels out, like it's evolving no matter what. And if people aren't willing to adapt with it, they might still have a business. And I think there's also 101 ways to grow a business. But in terms of using the online world, I feel like there's business owners who are either going to up level and implement the changes in their own way, or they're going to have to get creative and do other things, whether that's running ads, if it's in-person networking, like there's lots of many other ways. But I definitely think the standards have gone up, and so it's calling us up to be louder and bolder in our missions.
And you use that word depth. It's true.
Yeah.
People, like, they don't necessarily need you to hold their hand. Maybe, and maybe they did, and maybe there are folks there too, but they want to know that, okay, so what does it mean to transform my life? Like, how am I going to transform my life? And
Yeah.
because before, you are right, 2021 that worked.
Totally.
Now it's like, what is the transformation? And that's what I love, even seeing your social media content, because you do, like, you share, um issues that people could be struggling with, or you're giving a bit more substance to it to actually help someone. And that generosity as well is more appealing for someone to want to work with you, because even for me personally, I was seeing that. I'm like, oh, like, that's so nice that she's sharing all of this stuff and she doesn't care. It's like she's going to put it there regardless if somebody's working with her or not. But I'm more inclined to want to be in your world because of that generosity. And once again, that word, no gatekeeping.
Yeah, I think the no gatekeeping's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, how can people find, once again, show notes are going to have all of this. However, how can people find you? What are nice, even entry level ways to explore being in your world?
Yeah, thanks so much for allowing me to share. I am in a lot of places online, but I would say I primarily hang out on Instagram, and second to that would be Facebook. So you can search my name up on there or my brand's and it'll pull it in. And that is where I give a lot of content. I really treat my ecosystem, my community, basically like clients. So I share a lot of things on there and really like to model what I stand for. So that's a great place in itself to come plug in. My podcast, the Soulmate Strategy podcast, like you mentioned, also a really great entry point. And then if you go into my website or my link in bio, anybody listening to this, you're going to see there's always amazing entry points. If you want to get a little deeper and check out my world, whether you want to do a self-paced kind of resource and just dip your toe, or if you want to come into my membership, that's a really great place if you are more of a self-paced kind of person, but you do want to be plugged in, or if you're looking for more of the high proximity support, you'll find my options on there as well for things like my masterminds as well.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So it has been so wonderful having you here as a guest. And as I mentioned, we will have all of the links in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time and your heart, Jenna.
Thanks so much for having me, and everybody who joined us, whether audio or YouTube. Thanks so much for being here with us for this whole episode and this beautiful transmission.